So welcome everyone. Really glad to host you today for this webinar about employer branding and attractivity. So to present myself, I'm Aurélie Lamy-Ducasse. I'm in charge of recruitment at Assess First, joined last year, and today I'm with Cole.
Yep, so thanks, Aurélie. So my name is obviously Colm, and I'm Customer Success Manager here at Assess First. And exactly as Aurélie said, today we're going to be talking and discussing what candidates are really expecting from their employers today in 2020, and obviously how to improve this employer brand. What can we do? So I guess I can see from the participants that we have a few clients connected already, which is great. But for anybody who doesn't know who we are or doesn't know what Assess First do, we're basically specialists in what we call predictive recruitment. And our mission is really to help you, I guess, identify amongst all of your candidates, whether it be internal or external, the people with the most potential to succeed in that specific position in your specific company, but also to be motivated, engaged, and happy in that position. And the unique aspect to this approach of recruitment is that we're not necessarily going to look at the classic criteria that we find on a CV or on a LinkedIn page, for example, but we're really going to look at the evaluation of potential and more so who that person really is. So Assess First, we work with lots of different companies, lots of different types of industries across lots of different countries. For example, we have 3,500 customers across 40 different countries. And I guess the reason why I'm starting with this is just to explain that we have this really, I guess, really privileged position today. We're discussing these issues, these difficulties, these problems with our clients across all of these different countries and industries every single day, every single week. And as a result, we have a really kind of deep insight into what's happening today, what's happening year after year in terms of recruitment. So thanks to all of these interactions that we have with all of these different clients across all of these different countries, what we've done today is we've identified 9 key points that are paramount to concentrate on when we're looking at this famous employer brand. And the first point that we've identified is that it's really, really important to make sure we're genuinely interested and care about our employees and our candidates. I know some of these pointers that we'll talk about today might seem very, very basic to you, and you're probably thinking, okay, thanks for that, I knew that already. However, so many companies are still getting it wrong today. And one study showed us that 96% of people thought that it was very important to be appreciated at work. So obviously, I think this seems really obvious to us all. You know, we'd have difficulty imagining ourselves in a position where we didn't feel appreciated or we didn't think our work was valued. But that same study went on to show us that only 37% of employees today are satisfied with their level of appreciation in their job. So this means that 6 people out of 10 who are in work today aren't satisfied with their level of appreciation, whether it's from colleagues or managers or the direction, whatever it may be. So this is a real problem. The second interesting fact that we have is when CEOs were asked what is their #1 priority today, only 30% mentioned the talent strategy. So attracting the right people, recruiting the right people, developing their talent. So this is the #1 priority for only 3 out of 10 CEOs. The second point we've identified is to be present on the market. So to make sure we have a strong presence, and I guess more importantly, to be present where the candidates are. So today, we know that millennials spend on average a little bit more than 15 hours a week on their telephone. I say on average, but I think it's probably a lot more for certain people, which means that today, if we want to be attractive to our candidates, we have to be able to offer an experience that is mobile friendly. If we have our candidates that are visiting our website or our jobs board, whatever it may be, and then they're realizing that actually they can't view it on the mobile, they can't apply on their phone, and we're instantly going to lose these candidates. We're all chasing the same great talent today, and we have to be able to facilitate the process as much as possible for them. So it's not enough just to be mobile friendly. We also need to take into account where our candidates are and where we're going to be able to enter into contact with them. And today, most of our candidates are on the social networks. So if we're present on these networks, we're going to be able to enter into contact with these candidates, not only when they're looking for a job, but also when they're not necessarily looking for a job, but they're possibly in a different headspace and they're more open or receptive to information or offers. whether that be on Facebook or Instagram or whatever the network may be. So today, in order for a company to be attractive to their candidates and to have a strong employer brand, they must be present on these social networks, simply because that's where we're going to find these new candidates. And just one more piece of information that I found quite interesting that kind of ties in with this mobile-friendly experience is that research has shown that 50% of candidates are open to receiving offers from recruiters by text message. The reason I think this is interesting is because I think a lot of people today, a lot of companies or recruiters still have this idea that no, text message, it's too intrusive, it's not professional enough. Again, I'm not saying that this is something we should do for every single position, but 50% of people are open to this. And furthermore than that, we have 98% of those text messages that are going to be open, that are going to be read and consulted by our candidates. And any of us that work in that kind of marketing industries with this data every day, we know that this is nothing compared to kind of the low percent that we would have for things like email, for example. So things like being present on the social networks, as we saw, having a mobile-friendly experience, and not hesitating to use text message are things that are really going to help us improve that employer brand. The third point is to offer the best possible experience to our candidates. So first-class experience. Why? Well, let's imagine that we have a candidate who comes to our company who absolutely falls in love with the job, with the company, with the mission, with the task, with the team. And all of that ends with them being completely disappointed or disheartened, all because of a bad system of communication between the company, whether it be the managers and recruiters, and the candidate. So today, candidates often express frustration by the fact that they're going to have these interviews. And I know for certain companies, it's a really rigorous process. You'll have a first interview by telephone with the recruiter. You'll have a second interview with the managers and so on. So a process that they dedicate their time and energy to. Often in these cases, there's also case studies involved or role plays. And this often ends with either little or no communication. So this can be really, really frustrating. We can have the great website with the great pitch and the great photos of the company, but once the candidate enters into the funnel, it's here that the communication is either inexistent or really, really lacking, and that's going to completely ruin the quality of this experience and or brand. So we have to remember that today a candidate will be open to opportunities on average for 10 days. So it means that it's in our real best interest, firstly, not to waste any time and to make sure that we maintain good communication and keep the candidate informed for every step of the process. I think that a lot of people have had that experience of going to an interview and just never hearing back, which of course is really disappointing and creates a bad image. But also, I think even more so, a lot of people have had that experience of going to an interview and not hearing any news for a week or two and just kind of thinking, oh, they must not be interested. And then kind of suddenly getting an email for a third interview or a second interview. And that as well is going to completely ruin our image and completely ruin the experience for the candidate. The fourth point that we've identified that is important for the employer brand is for us to be able to offer attractive development and evolution opportunities within our company. So the idea here is that people aren't going to just come to our company for this specific job we're offering or that is available today, but they're really going to come because they believe in the vision, in the objectives, in the values, and it's not just a pit stop for them. So today we have 57% of people that are convinced that if they want to progress or evolve, it's going to be much easier to do that by changing company rather than do it in the company where we are today. On the other hand, we have 93%, so that's almost everyone, who state that they're ready to stay in their current company if that company can offer them evolution perspectives. And we also have 86% of millennials, so a little bit more specific this time, that say that they're willing to stay in the current company if we can offer them training and development. So again, if this is something that we're offering in our company, if this is something we know that is available, absolutely, let's communicate about it. Let's include that in our pitch. And again, that's all going to be doing great work for our employer brand. The fifth point we've identified is to take into account or pay special attention to everything related to diversity and inclusion. So I think today we often hear talk about diversity, which is great. The problem is, I think a lot of companies are still viewing it as a sort of legal obligation. This idea that, we're going to be really careful about the words we use in our job posting, about the language, about the photos on our website, about the interview process. We're going to be really, really careful so we don't get into any trouble. Well, okay, the problem with this is, well, firstly, you're completely missing the point, but secondly, you're really missing a lot of opportunities. And I think, firstly, what we need to understand is the difference between diversity and inclusion. And we actually have a partner over in Europe, one of our partners that we regularly do events with, called Mosaic HR. And we did an event a few months ago, and they had a really nice way to describe the difference between diversity and inclusion. And they said, basically, diversity is when we invite you to the party. So that's great, you're invited to the party. Whereas inclusion is where during this party, we're going to ask you to dance, we're going to interact with you. So what we need to know is that we really need to make sure that each person feels comfortable and like they have a place in our company. And that's really going to reinforce our brand and make it more attractive to our candidates. And you can see here today we have 83% of millennials who state that they're going to be much more engaged and want to put energy into the project if they have the impression to evolve in an environment which understands the importance of conclusion of every individual, whatever the background, gender, race, whatever that may be. And the sixth point we've identified is to be as transparent as possible with our candidates from the very first interaction. So for them to really understand the values of the company, as I mentioned earlier, to join a company is really to join a set of values, a mission, a task. And we're going to be really honest and transparent with our candidates about those missions, about those tasks, about the strategy of the company, and also about the reasons that we're recruiting them. Here again, we can see that those companies that are most transparent with their candidates, these companies will have 2.5 times more chance to be super performant in comparison to those companies who are less transparent with their candidates and employees. The seventh point that we're looking at here in terms of employer branding is all about the importance of the onboarding process. And firstly, I should say we will be doing a webinar dedicated to this in 2 weeks, I believe, Aurelie.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we'll have a specific webinar dedicated to the onboarding process. So anybody who's kind of interested in that can sign up for that. But just in terms of employer brand, this is something that's really, really important. Firstly, I guess because it's nice from the point of view of the candidate or the new employee. They really feel appreciated, as if you were kind of waiting for them, I guess. But also from the point of view of the company, there's lots of advantages. So what we can see here is the average rate of progression for an employee who joins the company. So I arrive, I learn the ropes, progressively I'm going to evolve and learn what I need to learn in order to do that job. What we need to know is that when we optimize the onboarding process, we're going to accelerate what we call the time to perform. So this is obviously the term for the time it takes for a person to perfectly master everything they need to do for their job. And when we have a good quality onboarding process, it will allow us to increase the productivity by 70%. And that's not all. A good quality onboarding process will also impact the length of time that our employees stay with us. So we have found quite a high correlation between the manner in which we manage the arrival of our employee, so the manner in which they're welcomed at the start and guided at the start and onboarded, and the length of time they stay in our company. So a good quality onboarding process is going to increase the chance that this employee is still in our company by 58% 3 years later. Okay, and I know a lot of the time we think, okay, I understand onboarding is really important. I'm not denying it, but it takes a lot of time and energy and resources. And that may be the case, but we need to remember that good quality onboarding is not just some sort of welcome gift that we're giving the employee, but it's really an investment. An investment from the point of view of performance, but also kind of in order for us to get a return on investment, because we're creating loyal employees who are going to stay with us for longer. The eighth point we're going to look at is is to allow our employees to be flexible at work. So today we have 80% of candidates who state that they would be ready to refuse an offer if the job wasn't able to offer them a sufficient level of flexibility. So for them to be able to find a good balance between this kind of professional and personal life. I think today remote work is part of all of the expectations of our candidates. Obviously, at the moment, we're obliged to work remotely, but under normal circumstances, this allows us to increase the likelihood that an employee will stay in our company by 10%. Remote work, we've talked about it in previous webinars, but it can also help from performance level and also a financial level. Again, it's really helping us create those loyal employees who are going to stay longer, which of course in return will improve that kind of employer brands to the other candidates. The ninth point and the final point that we've identified is something that came up time and time again. And it's just simply to have the possibility to be yourself at work. As time goes by, we're seeing that people less and less are wanting to go to work to put on a mask or to play a role. And here at Access First, we actually did a study last year, and we were questioning the fact of whether or not it was important for people to be able to be themselves at work. And what we found is that 70% of people said that it was very important for them to be able to be themselves in the professional world and to express themselves freely. And more so than that, we saw 20% of people who think that it would be completely out of the question if they were obliged to sacrifice too much of themselves, to put aside too much of themselves. So this means that out of 5 people we recruit, if we don't allow them to freely be themselves and express who they are, there's a chance that we're going to risk losing one of those people prematurely. And unfortunately, it's one of the best performing people that might leave us. So I know it's great saying, oh, everyone should be allowed to be themselves and express their personality, but what does that really mean in real terms, and how do we do that? So the first thing I would say is it means us being able to express our personality freely, which firstly is in terms of the job, being in a job that allows us to express, that corresponds to our behavior, that allows us to express our natural talents and adopt our natural behaviors. It's also in the fact of developing in a good atmosphere. So within a good team, within a good manager, having a relationship of trust as well. And then also kind of, I guess, in our daily interactions, making sure that we're limiting conflicts to the maximum and the person is genuinely comfortable. So it's these kind of 4 fundamental elements that will really allow somebody to express who they are and to be free in that professional environment. And for me, this is kind of a real generational thing as well, because I think 40, 50 years ago, it was the case of people had 2 different personalities. They had their work life and they had their personal life. And today people don't want to do that. Already we spend so much time with our colleagues in the office. We want to be able to be ourselves. We want to go to work every day. We want to share who we are with our colleagues. We don't want to have to put on a sort of mask or play a certain type of role. And what we're going to look at now with Orly is how at Assess First we pull all of this into place in real terms.
Yep, exactly.
Oop.
My turn now. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. So how does it work at Assess First actually? It's really interesting when you talk about employer branding to start get interested into marketing, because the basic idea of marketing is getting interested into the consumer's needs, what they actually want and what they expect from the brands. And actually employer branding is exactly the same. We're getting interested in what our candidates are expecting from us. So the first thing we should work on to improve our employer branding is what actually candidate can see from the outside of your company. And the first usual thing is the job adverts. And there's some kind of a rumor saying that you can't post long adverts. And it's really not the truth. Most of people think that we have to write really short annonces because they're convinced that the millennials, they don't want to read anymore. They want to scroll on their phone and they want it to go really fast and short and brief. But actually, it's not the truth. If you give the right information to the people, actually a long advert is totally fine. Like the long is not the enemy of the good. If it's too long, but just for blah blah, then yes, there's no input and it's not useful. But if you share the information that a candidate is looking for For example, in the United States, candidates are looking for different information like the recruitment process, how is going to happen the recruitment process. They also are looking for more than 50% of them for the salary on the adverts. And I know talking about salary maybe sometimes a bit taboo when you're in a recruitment process, and sometimes you can't even talk about it because you're in a recruitment agency and it's anonymous and everything. But there's always a way, I mean, to share the information. The idea today, many candidates believe that you're trying some tricky things to play with the budget or whatever. So as Colm said, being transparent is one of the best way to improve your employee branding, and it actually goes through sharing the salary. And less than actually 36% of the ads are today share their salary. So there's really a gap between the expectations and what actually is really happening, because 50% is like mandatory for them, but a lot more candidates are expecting this information. What we actually did at Assess First, and in our ads at the end, we decided, like, for example, to share the recruitment process, how it's going to happen, just to reassure and give some visibility to the candidate. I mean, it doesn't took time for myself to write this, and it's not really complicated, and I'm not giving some confidential information. So each ad actually should share this information that is really useful for the candidate. The second thing that you can work on to improve your employee branding is actually your personal branding. What is interesting is that the HR or the interviewer, the recruiter, whoever it is actually your best ambassador, as it's the first person that is going to be in contact with the candidate. And I myself wasn't really comfortable with sharing content on social media not that long ago. And I started doing some LinkedIn posts in December. And actually, what we have to know is that most of the people and candidates actually trust information that comes from collaborators rather than the company. So you increase the trust by posting directly from the recruiter's accounts or even the collaborators' accounts. And you also reach new people that you wouldn't have reached only throughout the official company page. So you're gaining visibility, you're gaining business opportunities, you're gaining new candidates that maybe didn't know you, but now actually they do. I have many people today that are directly applying to me because they actually saw a post or a video that I uploaded or something like that. So I'm really gaining some visibility. And it's also good for your collaborators to do it. It will increase your cooptation, of course, which is a gain in money and time. And yeah, that's it. What's another important thing that you have to work on to increase your attractivity is the different pages. So what do I mean by pages? For example, it's going to be your Glassdoor or your career page. And to give you an example, not that long ago at Assess First, we didn't really take care of these pages, well, Glassdoor in specific, and we had old pictures, old information, not that much grades. And so we started getting interested into it because like more than 90% of candidates that want to apply to a company are going actually to do some research over the internet. So on those pages actually, but also to your collaborators. So you really have to you remember that ambassador thing. Well, it's even more and more accurate today as social media allows candidates to contact directly your collaborators. So you really have to take care of this information because, to give you an example, not that long ago, I had a candidate over the phone and he was like, oh yeah, great. I saw on your Glassdoor page a video or interview about one of your collaborators. He was product owner, really interesting. And I was like, oh, geez, he left 2 years ago. You know, the information wasn't updated. So it's kind of awkward situation. So it's good to update all of these pages. Of course, obviously, as Colm said, to improve your employer branding, you really have to work on your candidate experience. And we've been working really, really hard on it at Assess First. And there's three big categories. There's the length of the recruitment process. It seems obvious, of course, we've been talking about it. And the shorter it is, the more efficient it is for the candidate, and the more the experience is better, obviously. But what is interesting is that Colm said that a candidate usually stays like 10 days on the market, is looking for an opportunity around 10 days. But in the US today, it takes around more than 20 business days to recruit someone, like almost a month. So you're losing so many candidates by wasting so much time, maybe because you have too many interviewers in the recruitment process. In Assess First, we decided actually to reduce the numbers of interviewer. I decided to stop doing interviews to gain something. I didn't want to do a double person against the candidate's interview. So I do the first one by the phone, and then the other one is with the manager, etc. But there's less interviews to gain time, actually. The second important point, of course, and Colm said as well, is communication. We've been working hard on that one too. And especially on the direct communication with the candidates, I almost never use emails, actually, because millennials and even myself, I don't use that much emails. I don't really like it, actually. And I use it to confirm interviews, for example. So it's formal, it's professional, and you have the confirmation. Okay, great. But the rest of the time, I usually use text, mobile phone text with my candidates. And actually, the return, the rate, the transformation rate, let's say like that, is really, really great. And I'm sure to have an answer actually really fast. And there's some kind of a rumor actually also saying that it's really intrusive and it's not really professional. But actually, I think it's not the truth. It's not only a question of generation, because of course millennials, they will love it. But I'm actually sure my dad, who is about 50 and in finance, would love to receive his offers by text rather than mail. The other thing is, of course, giving negative feedback. I'm stating obvious things, but it's really sad to see that it's not applied and that it's not that obvious finally. And giving constant feedback. What do I mean by constant feedback? I'm going to give you a French example, but maybe you can apply that to an American example. Like in Paris, we have the subway, and maybe you know the reputation of the French subway, which is really chaotic. And most of the time when you are in the subway, at some point, it's going to stop in the middle of the way, and all the lights are going to shut down, and you have absolutely no idea what is going on. And it's really stressful, and you're waiting, maybe sometimes 30 minutes, and still have zero information on what is going on. And there's a new rule that has been imposed to all the drivers, and they actually have to announce to all the people that are in train, okay, we're stopped, as you noticed. I don't have anything to tell you because I don't have any information, but whenever I have some, I will tell you. And actually, this is the best rule ever that we can also apply to candidates. Some process can obviously take a long time because you didn't have the feedback of the manager, because for X, Y reason, we don't know. But in that meantime, your candidate is stressing at home, wondering what is happening. You can just send a text, as I said a bit earlier, saying, okay, I don't have anything to announce, I don't have any information, but at least I'm writing to you, telling that I will come back to you whenever I have something. It's really reassuring for their candidate, and it takes like 30 seconds to write. It's really fast. And 60% of candidates don't receive updates about their interview process at all. Like 60%, this is so much. It's a huge number, actually. And as I said, at text, it takes 30 seconds. So that's what I do personally, and I advise you to do exactly the same. The third point, obviously, is the candidate experience, giving them a positive and unique experience. Today, like 52% of job seekers wouldn't recommend a company if they didn't receive a timely response about their status. So you're really, it really has a bad impact on your personal branding. And it's even worse that these candidates are going to talk to other candidates and other candidates. It's like, it's really a long distance network bad impact, you know. Sorry. Let's do a little focus on COVID-19 because the situation is a bit unique and a bit weird actually, and that you have to, in this context, to adapt your employer branding strategy. So at this point, the problem is that we have some kind of an insecurity zone. COVID-19 is really in the dark, you know. You have no idea when it's going to end, what is the evolution, what is going to happen. And for the candidates, it's even more complicated because they have absolutely no idea what is going on. So our objective is to actually put those people that are in the insecurity zone in that interested and ready to change zone. And I don't know if it's the case in the United States, but surprisingly, I was afraid to have really a bad impact on my recruitments because of COVID. And actually, a lot of people today have time to think about their career and their position, their job, their company, and wondering if they're in the right place. And actually, they're pretty open to positions. So I'm quite lucky, maybe, but it's more positive than what I thought. I was really expecting a really bad situation. So miracles obviously don't exist. It's really a unique, and it's the first time we're living a situation like that. So I can give you advices, but it depends on the company, the place, the country, and everything. So I won't have solutions. Today, a candidate that is in this situation and looking for a position, what is he going to expect from the recruiter? He's expecting three things, actually. He's going to expect the recruiter to reassure him. Because, okay, it's stressful for a recruiter, but imagine if you don't have any job and you're on the other side, a candidate, and you're looking for a position and you're convinced that everything is blocked and you have no job open. It's really, really, really stressful. So as a recruiter, you can start by reassuring him, giving him some optimism. The time is, as I said, a bit stressful. It's really kind of pessimist, to be honest. I don't really like it. I'm a person that is quite positive, so I try to transmit my positive to my candidates actually, and usually they answer with a lot of enthusiasm. So the next point would be clarity, because as I said, they have absolutely no idea of what is going on and what they have to do. And what we actually did at Access First is that we decided to have a new communication strategy. So it started with LinkedIn and the messages that I can send by email to contact my candidates. So I decided to completely change the way I contact my candidates. I believe you all have received these horrible emails that are pretty boring to read, that have absolutely no information. And at the end, you're like, I'm not even going to answer. Well, when we were in normal context situation, candidates were reading these kind of emails and saying themselves, I don't care, I will forget about it. And today, now they have the time to actually read your emails and get interested in what you're doing. So if you continue sending these kind of emails, you're just killing yourself, because they are going to remember you now, and your employer branding is really going to get a hit. Let's say it like that. It's really bad. So what I decided to do is to actually, in my email, apply those three advices that I gave you earlier: reassure, give some clarity, and positivism, optimism. So I work a lot with humor, and smileys and all kind of stuff that actually can bring joy to people that is going to read the email. And I had a really a lot of good answers. It's the first time I had a return rate that is that high. It was over like 60%, so it's really nice. And people were, even if they weren't really interested in the position, for example, or whatever, they actually were answering, and that is the best things to have. So that was what the first thing. The second thing we did is that we decided to on the position that were still open, because unfortunately some positions were frozen, but we are still recruiting today in this context some people. So on the job adverts that I uploaded, I put on the top of the announce a little text saying, okay, you can apply. I am still recruiting on this position. You don't be afraid. Don't worry. I will consider your application. Because the problem is that you have many adverts on the web, but today you have absolutely no idea as a candidate if the position is still open regarding the situation. So at least I'm giving clarity. The position is open. Go on. So that's all for me. Don't hesitate to ask questions. And to give you more information, next week we are going to have another webinar about pre-selection. To give you more information, at Assess First, well, obviously we use our questionnaires Assess First to do pre-selection, but the most important is that 80% of our jobs, we don't look to resume, CV, and LinkedIn pages. We're not interested into experience. Like only 20% of our jobs we are interested in experience. So it's a new way, let's say, of pre-selection. So we're going to talk about that next week.
Yes, so guys, as already said, feel free to type in any questions you may have. We already have one or two here, so let's just have a look. Okay, so we have one that's saying, how do we continue to promote our employer brand during this time, during this pandemic? I don't really think the pandemic should change anything in terms of your employer brand. You know, you should continue communicating about the company, about what you're doing, even if it's kind of quite mundane examples. Like, for example, with Assess First, we're continuing to do lots of kind of I guess social distancing, of course, but social events, whether it be kind of games nights or we'll have cooking classes together. So we'll continue to do these type of things, and obviously we're kind of communicating about that on the social networks that I mentioned. So people are still seeing what's going on. People are still kind of getting an idea of the company, of the culture, of the people that are working there, and that's things that will definitely stick with those people kind of after this time. I don't know if already you have kind of any other.
Yeah, totally. I mean, employer branding doesn't depend on the jobs that you have today and that are open. It's employer branding is actually telling the world what is happening inside your company. So it doesn't only depend on the positions that are open. It's really showing what is going on. So I don't know if you checked our Assess First LinkedIn page or even Instagram, because we have an Instagram, and a lot of content that we can share are actually articles or some pictures of our collaborators in remote. So it's not necessarily linked to the positions. So you can actually share a lot of content during this period. Yeah. There's more time.
Yeah. We have one other question here. We have another question saying, lots of talk about diversity and inclusion and being yourself at work. Any tips on how to improve or encourage this in our company? Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's something we could probably do a webinar on in itself. But I guess to give you a real example of what we do or how we approach this subject. Well, firstly, as I already said, with Assess First, we don't concentrate on that background, on that CV, on the education. We're really looking towards potential and who that person really is and their natural behaviors. And as a result, we have a really, really diverse workforce. So people from all walks of life. We have a DJ, and we have musicians, and we have actors, and we have drag queens, and we have one of our sales comes from a cabaret background. I'm going to say our best sales in case she's listening. So we have a really wide, diverse range of of employees and workforce. And what we do is we make sure to include those personalities in our events. So Lucy, who's one of the girls who's responsible for a lot of those internal events, she's really good at making sure that when we have those events, it's always concentrated around what people are passionate about, and what really represents them as people and not only employees. So for example, lots of the work events that we'll do is things like going to a concert of somebody from the company, going to a play that somebody is in from the company, going to a DJ session that somebody is doing. So it's always incorporating the employees' passions into our work events and our team building events.
Totally. I don't have anything to add. And we actually do have another question. Do you actually recruit on TikTok and Snapchat? Well, I personally don't. We could. There's a lot of people, but the generation of people that is on TikTok or Snapchat isn't really my target, to be honest. What is interesting is mainly probably to source on these kind of platforms like Facebook. Facebook has so many millions and even billions of people. So I wouldn't contact, personally, I think, people for job offers on these platforms though, but I know some companies actually do, so why not? Maybe.
And again, I think it's really important as well that we're not necessarily talking about do you actually recruit people on these networks, but it's about employer branding. So it's about getting the information out there, getting the company out there and the image out there and improving that image. For example, I think today 80% of millennials, even 85, are going to go and check out the company to see if they're on Instagram, for example. I know myself, if ever I'm just looking at a company or partnering with a company or whatever we're doing, I'll always want to see what that company is doing, what they're about, what the atmosphere is like. So it's not necessarily about contacting the employees on those companies. And of course, TikTok, of course, it's not going to be for every single company, for every single job. But, in those jobs where we're targeting that young millennial workforce, that's where we're going to really improve our employer brand and get the image out there and change things.
Yeah, some companies have Snapchat pages, and we have our Instagram page. So we have another question. If we reduce the length of the interview process, how do we find out if the candidate is really interested in the position? Most of the candidates back off during their final interview, giving lame reasons. Any tips? First of all, if you have a long process, and if you have, for example, we see that a lot in big companies, if you have really long forms that you have to complete and retype your resume in it, and it takes like 20 pages to fill, you're not going to have the best motivated candidate at the end, but the one that is desperate, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So making long things isn't reliable to get motivated people, unfortunately. And we are in a market where candidates have the choice, and there's a lot of them. There's more offers than candidates, and in specific for some positions like developers. So clearly, if they have the opportunity to have a position in 1 week and you're making them wait for 3 weeks, well, they're going to take the decision. So maybe the lame reasons they're giving is actually because they found something else faster, and it's not a gauge of motivation, unfortunately, to go to the end of the process. It's pretty long. I don't know if you think the same, Colm.
Yeah, I do. I don't necessarily think that the length of time is going to change the fact of somebody wanting to do that job or not. Just because we have a slightly quicker recruitment process, it doesn't mean that the candidate is going to say, oh, well, I don't want to do this job, but, it was only 2 weeks, so let's go. I think that, if somebody is invested and somebody wants to do that job, We really need to react quickly before somebody else gets in there. But I don't necessarily think it's going to change anything in terms of kind of the people that aren't motivated.
Yeah, totally. I believe. Yeah. You can't be the only company giving 1 month recruitment process while 90% of the others, for example, last at least 20 days. I mean, at least you can do like the others. And
yeah,
I hope I answered your questions.
So I think that's all the questions that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's all the question we have. I think we have one more.
Going off and okay, there's a question actually. Going off of encouraging people to be themselves at work, a lot of graduates and young adults may look to be the right candidate rather than themselves to try to secure a position during this time. If people are applying from a place of anxiety due to this time, does your solution provide a way to reveal their motivators, and they'd be a good fit?
So yeah, I guess firstly what we should say is that the solution has 3 different questionnaires involved. So we're not just analyzing somebody's natural behaviors, their natural talents, what comes naturally. We're also actually taking into account their motivations and the aptitudes as well. So what's most interesting for us is to really find the fix or the fit, the match between I am able to do this job, I have the behaviors, I have the natural talents to do this job, and also I really, really want to do this job. And the second thing I would say is regarding this question is that a lot of the times companies don't necessarily know what you're looking for as well. At Access First, we're looking for people who can really, really think on their feet, who can be reactive, who don't hesitate to be autonomous. And again, if I was a young graduate applying for the position, it's not necessarily something that I'm going to be aware of, I'm going to know, but we're definitely going to look in terms of their results to see if it's kind of matching between the motivations and the personality and what we can kind of offer, what we're looking for the job.
And actually, this is something I do as well on the phone when I'm with a candidate and I have the feeling he's calculating his answers and trying to look good, actually, over the phone. I will directly tell him that if he wants to continue with us and go to the next step, we are really looking for people that are going to be natural with us and they don't calculate what they're saying and doing, and that it's even better for them to act natural. Because if you force yourself too much in a position, in a job or in a company, at the end you're just going to end up I won't say exploding, but it's not really the term. Faking too much is just the wrong thing to do, because at some point it's gonna stop, so it won't work anymore.
And again, I think most importantly, we're often underestimating the candidates today, because as I already was saying, it really is a candidates market. They have so much choice today, and them more than any recruiter wants to find a position where they can be themselves. So they want to find a position where they're going to fulfill their full potential and be comfortable and in a good environment. So they're going to want that just as much as the recruiter wants to recruit that person.
Totally.
And I
think we're good.
Oh yeah. Okay.
No winner. Great.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions after this webinar, of course, you can feel free to contact myself already. And otherwise, we will be back again next week with the next one.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for joining and hopefully see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.